happened. An unusual habit. When I saw him doing this for the first time, and when he noticed that I was looking, he smiled and told me that another day was gone. He sounded relieved. He was rubbing out his life, day by day. Sometimes he would leave the house late at night and go for a walk. It might be hours. I never knew where he went. He could disappear morning or night, and when I asked, he told me that he just wanted to keep the black dog away. I think he preferred the night, and there was no one to trouble him. That's why he slept in the day. Another hour could be lost.
Sorry? No,
he
I'm
slept
not.
in the day. After lunch,
They've been driving far too fast.
asleep for 1 hour exactly, even in office hours. He stayed on late to make up for it and was always last to leave and lock up. So often he was late for dinner or distracted. And sometimes I didn't know what I could do or say to help
We'd be
him.
fine if we can get.
As long as you get in front of these people.
If we can get in front of these people, we're
There
fine.
is a steep hill over there,
Right.
but as long as you put it in first.
Yeah. Well, we're stuck in low ratio, unfortunately. I can't even get out of low ratio, so
That's unfortunate, really.
at the moment it's not.
That's why we're not driving back to London tonight, because we can't drive fast enough. That's where we were intending to be tonight.
Nice.
But
Yeah.
we can't, it's too slow to get there, so
Yeah, that's a bit of a journey.
Anyway,
You get the idiots like this lot.
I
You
know.
drive too fast.
I know. I've had to stop to let them go past twice, and then they've gone off.
I'm
And
mad.
they come up behind you and don't leave enough.
I'll wait until you go there.
Absolutely, we'll do that.
Yeah.
Yes, I wonder where they've
Like
got.
I said, my Land Rover struggled to get up it.
Really?
Yeah. It's got
The only
me.
problem with this is it's a bit light. It's bloody good. It will get over anything, but it's a bit light.
Have they pulled in?
Not us.
Not us. That's true. No, these are the ones. What do you suppose is happening now?
I don't know.
And how are we going to find out if it's gone? It's the drivers. And there's the people who are pushing. Where did they get to? Oh. Shouldn't we have asked?
We can at least turn around here.
In there.
I mean, we're right with this stuff.
Yes.
In 200 meters, make a U-turn.
Wow.
That doesn't straight. I'm taking us a very strange way, I would have thought.
Once I asked him if perhaps it made life worse to wake up twice in a day. Sydney opened the diary. It was small and leather-bound. The leaves were of lightweight airmail blue paper, and it came with a rubber-top pencil in its spine. The pages were so fragile that some had been torn through excessive rubbing out. Inside the front cover, written in an italic hand, was the owner's name, S. Staunton. On one page he read the word anniversary, on another, H's birthday. The only other markings were the remains of a pencil-marked division between morning and afternoon, AM and PM. Perhaps, Sydney thought, they were the remnants of appointments either side of his afternoon nap. And he would sleep anywhere? Sydney asked. It was a routine. At 2 o'clock every day. His last appointment ended every morning at 12:30. Lunch, sleep. And then his next appointment would be at 3:15. It was like a machine. He could sleep through anything. A bomb could go off and he would not notice. He sometimes worried that if he was ever driving the car at 2 o'clock, he would fall asleep, crash the car and kill himself. In the end, he did not need a car to do that for him. Sydney flicked through the diary. There didn't seem to be anything of note, but perhaps he wondered he could examine it more closely at home when he had more time. Then he could work out what had been erased. Do you mind if I borrow this? He asked. Of course not. There's nothing to see. It might have sentimental value. We were not sentimental people. All I wanted in my life was someone to be kind to me. And I found him. We were not happy all the time. But I do not think we were ever sad. Now, of course, this has gone. Sydney wondered if Hildegard was about to cry, and then realised that it was he who was on the verge of tears. He felt immense pity for her, and yet he could not think how to express it, or give her comfort. He wished he were a better clergyman.
20% killed.
You have your memories, he said quietly. Yes, of course. Hildegard Staunton tried to accept Sydney's cliché. I have my memories. And now I have to start again. If there's anything I can do. Sydney knew that his offer was weak. He was surprised by the alacrity of Hildegard Staunton's response. You can pray for me. And you can pray for my husband. You know that some people believe that people who take their own life will never go to heaven? I am not one of those people, said Sydney, and it is not for me to judge. We live as we can. If we fall short of our hopes and expectations, then we fall short. It is, if you will forgive me, part of being a Christian. We are not as we might be. Hildegard gave Sydney the faintest of smiles. Is that not a very long way of saying that nobody is perfect? It is, said Sydney.
It would have been a nice room.
Perhaps you should be a priest yourself. Oh, I don't think that would be allowed. A deaconess. You could be a deaconess.
Be very bad.
Now you are teasing me. I like to see you smile, said Sydney, boldly. And I like it that you make me smile,
So don't talk.
Hildegard replied. One of the advantages of being a clergyman, Sydney decided, was that you could disappear. Between services, no one quite knew where you were, who you might be visiting, or what you might be doing. And so, on most Mondays, his designated day off, he would bicycle a few miles out of town, ride out through the village lanes, and head for Wandlebury Ring and the Iron Age forts of the Gog-Magog Hills. Here Sydney sat, with the sandwiches and flask of tea that Mrs. Maguire had prepared, and let thoughts come to him. It was a form of prayer, he decided. It was not asking or talking, but waiting and listening. Autumn was his favourite time of year, not simply for its changing colours, but for the crispness in the air and the sharpness of the light. As the leaves fell, the landscape revealed itself, like a painting being cleaned or a building being renewed. You could see the underlying shape of things, This is what he wanted, he decided. Moments of clarity and silence. Sydney began to consider the case in which he had become involved. He was sure that Pamela Morton was right to be suspicious about Stephen Staunton's death, that all was not as it appeared. But how could he give her misgivings weight and substance? Why would a man whom so many people had been at pains to point out was definitely a suicide risk not have taken his own life? And if he had been murdered, then who could have done it? Clive Morton probably had a financial motive. Hildegard Staunton certainly had cause for resentment. And Sydney was still not sure about Miss Morrison. Sydney watched the low and sharp light of the day start to disappear behind the trees. Remembered that he had no lights on his bicycle. He would have to get back. He returned home, poured himself the smallest of Johnny Walkers against the chill of the night, and looked at Stephen Staunton's suicide note once more. Then, as the whiskey took care of his anxieties, the beginnings of an idea began to emerge. Sydney stopped. He picked up the pocket diary and looked at the seemingly random arrangements
I said we
of
can't
mornings
really
and
stop for a
afternoons
pee.
that had been
that's
added
fine,
in
I can
pencil.
manage. I can hang on perfectly well.
How could he have been so slow? It annoyed him beyond measure. To have taken the information at face value, to believe what people wanted him to believe. How had he allowed himself to be outwitted? He needed to see Pamela Morton once more, and urgently. But when he telephoned, it was her husband who answered. Struck by a sudden moment of nerves, Sydney put down the receiver. He sent her a note, but it was later the following afternoon before she called on him in person. After he had poured them both cups of tea, Sydney leaned forward in his chair and said, "I think, after all this time, that I might be making progress." Pamela Morton was still surprisingly ungrateful. "Oh, that would make a pleasant change. It has not been easy, Mrs. Morton, and I do think it might have been easier if you had gone straight to the police rather than the clergyman who is ill-equipped to deal with these matters. There is no need to be defensive, Count James. I know you would not have summoned me to your home if you did not have something to tell me. Is there the faintest chance that you might actually believe me?" "I have always believed you, Mrs. Morton." "I have told you before. Pamela." Sydney ignored her request. "Although I do need to ask you to account for your movements. On the day of the murder, you don't think I'm a suspect? That would be rich." "No, I am not saying that. But you might be suggesting it." "Well, it would be a good way of throwing us off the scent.
I think we've got
To suggest a murder that no one has considered to be murder. To open a case that was never going to be opened. Perhaps one would only do that if one wanted to frame someone else." "And do you think that is what I might have been doing?" "I don't wish to insult you, Mrs. Morton. You're doing a pretty good job so far. And I do have to think about every possibility. Your husband, for example. Yes, I can see why he might be a suspect, but I can assure you he knows nothing. He's too busy playing golf. He's obsessed. It's worse than gambling. That's as maybe. But I need you to be both specific and honest. That's how I've always been. And I must ask you to remember where you were on the evenings of October the 12th, 19th and 26th, the two nights of November the 3rd and 4th, and the night of November the 10th. You expect me to remember all that? It's very important.
Stay in low gear, that means there's a steep hill coming up.
And you want to know now? There is only one thing about these dates that interests me. November the 10th is the night before Stephen died. I certainly saw him then. I will always remember that. I told him that we just had to get through the winter. If we could just get through Christmas, then everything would be all right. And the other dates? I don't have to account for all of my movements, do I? You just have to tell me if these were the days on which you saw Stephen Staunton. October 12th, 19th and 26th, and the two nights of November the 3rd and 4th. Pamela Morton thought for a moment. I can't be exact without my own diary, but I can tell you that we did see each other 2 days running, because my husband was away, and it was probably on the 2 nights that you mentioned. If the other days were Tuesdays, then yes. I always get the 10:43 to London on Tuesdays. Stephen would follow me later. We went on separate trains. We were very careful, Canon Chambers. I want you to understand that. Why do you want to know? It would make everything clear, Mrs. Morton. Everything.
Looks as if it's been abandoned.
During many a moment in the course of his investigation, Canon Sidney Chambers considered once again how much he had neglected his calling.
To go.
He had attended meetings of the Mothers' Union, the Women's Institute and the PCC. He had organised the flower rota and typed up a timetable for the church wardens, the sidesmen and the volunteers to clean and polish the brasses. He had edited the monthly issue of the parish magazine, continued with the weekly Bible study group and run a series of confirmation classes. He had even taken a group of scouts and cubs on a hike, supervised the building of the Christmas crib, organised the carol singers and set up a search for a lost cat. At the same time, he continued his teaching at Corpus. Any visiting archdeacon sent to check up on him would have no cause for complaint, but Sidney knew that he was not at his best. He had not visited the sick as regularly as he had hoped. He was 3 weeks behind on his correspondence, and he had not even begun to write the big Advent sermon which he was due to preach in King's College Chapel. His standards were slipping. He thought of the general confession: "We have left undone those things which we ought to have done, and we have done those things which we ought not to have done." Sidney started to make a list, and at the top of the list, as he had been advised at theological college, was the thing that he least wanted to do. Always start with what you dread the most, he had been advised. Then the rest will seem less daunting. Easier said than done, thought Sidney, as he looked at the first item on the list of his duties. Tell Inspector Keating everything. It was a Monday afternoon, and he knew that a visit to the St. Andrew Street police station would not be popular. But so convinced was he about the accuracy of his recent deductions that he decided the truth was more important than a temporary bout of Inspector Keating's impatience. "I hope this is not going to become a habit," his friend warned. "Not at all, Inspector. I do have more information that I think is important." "My life consists of more information, Sidney. Sometimes I wish it would stop. I presume that you are referring to the solicitor's suicide?" "I've been thinking about the circumstances of the crime, the people involved, and the nature of love, Harry." "Oh dear." "And I just cannot believe that Stephen Staunton meant to kill himself.
Yeah, right.
I know that it all points to the fact that he did so, but I do not believe this to be the case. Nor do I believe that he drank any of the whiskey that was on his desk." "Then what was it doing there?" "A red herring, Inspector. It was even perhaps a way of pointing the finger at Clive Morton, a man who does not know as much about whiskey as he possibly should." "That does not make him a murderer." "I do not think that he is." "Oh, that's a relief. It only leaves every other inhabitant of Cambridge as a suspect. I don't suppose the victim could still be responsible for his own death, that the case could, in fact, be suicide." "You remember at the very beginning of our conversation on this subject, when I suggested that things could be too clear?" "Of course. Found your remark rather irritating." "I'm sorry, but this was the murderer's mistake." Knowing that I was on the case, she began to panic. In fact, she panicked so much that she was forced into producing her trump card, a suicide note. "You're suggesting she wrote it herself?"
There's a large hut somewhere.
"I am not, Inspector."
There must be a road to
"Then what are you suggesting?" "I am proposing that it is not a suicide note." "Oh, Sidney. Look again, Inspector." As the inspector examined the piece of paper, Sydney recited the text he had memorized. A. I can't tell you how sorry I am that it has come to this. I know you will find it upsetting, and I wish there was something I could do to make things right. I can't go on anymore. I'm sorry. So sorry. You know how hard it has been, and how impossible it is to continue. Forgive me, S. Seems pretty clear to me, Inspector Keating replied.
Have you got a phone?
And then again, not clear
Have you got a
enough.
phone?
But this is not a note
Have you got a
written by a
phone?
man who is about to kill himself.
Hey, you'll never make it up there.
Never make it on.
No, I'd go back.
Alright, cheers.
We were worried coming down in low ratio first.
Yeah, it's a bit the same coming down this other way.
All right.
Canon Sidney Chambers had never intended to become a detective.
Keep holding that. Try sliding the knob along the bottom. The knob bit.
There's nothing. He's too busy playing golf. He's obsessed. Police station. You, she said. The doors to the train opened, and the people of Cambridge boarded under luck that he had not decided. Yes, I can see that it could be. And you remember the private diary? The one with the entries in pencil that Mr. Staunton rubbed out each day?
This is the problem.
Of course I do. The one with the days marking the mornings and the afternoons. The one which might suggest a few appointments that he wanted to keep quiet. I can see what you might be saying. But they are more than that. Look again. Sydney produced the diary. AM and PM. What is wrong with that? They are never on the same day. And you will note that the initials AM occur less frequently as the initials PM increase. Which means Annabel Morrison and Pamela Morton. It is their initials. These are the memoirs of assignations. So you're suggesting that our solicitor friend had not one but two lovers? I am afraid I am. And did he have the energy? That is not something that should concern us, Harry. I'm still trying to understand it all. The man was involved with 3 women, if we include his wife. No wonder it all got too much for him. You're suggesting, I take it, that when his relationship with Mrs. Morton became more intense, he decided to end things with Miss Morrison. Exactly. And you think that she... I'm afraid so. Oh dear me. Sydney continued. You will remember that Mr. Staunton took a rest after lunch each day. You will also remember that every Wednesday afternoon, Mr. Morton plays golf, which leaves only 2 people in the office on the day of the murder. Annabel Morrison and Stephen Staunton. Miss Morrison has received the note from Mr. Staunton ending their affair. What is more, she suspects that a new relationship has begun. She cannot be sure, but such is her fury, and such is her rejection, that she determines that no one else will enjoy the attentions of the man she loves. We know that Mr. Staunton is a strong sleeper. His wife told me he could sleep through anything, even the sound of the 2:33 express train to London. For it is at that moment that Miss Morrison places the gun in his open mouth and pulls the trigger of the revolver she has removed from the desk. The sound is masked by the noise of the train. She then places a half-empty decanter of whiskey on the desk, little caring that it is a whiskey her employer would never drink, because the appearance of suicide is so strong. Only when we begin to doubt does she produce the note, which, she realizes, can be converted from a Dear John letter into an explanation for suicide. He's very clever. That's all very well, Sydney, but the evidence is very circumstantial. How on earth are we going to prove all this? I shall need 3 of your best men this Wednesday morning. The railway station at Cambridge was built in the 1840s, in a symmetrical style in warm local stone, and was the heart of a regular service between London and King's Lynn. When it was at its busiest, the platforms were crowded with people, and this morning was no exception. The stooping elderly Don kept dropping a selection of books, which he had tied up with string. 3 girls were preparing to put their bicycles into the guard's van. A couple of schoolboys kicked a football, and Pamela Morton was waiting for the 10:43 express train to London. She was wearing a dark burgundy coat, a matching beret, and she carried a small portmanteau.
Greta.
A thick-set man in a double-breasted navy pinstripe suit stood to her right. He looked, to all intents and purposes, to be a man about to do business in the city, but he held neither briefcase, papers, nor an umbrella. As the express train approached, a petite but determined woman with silver hair pinned in a bun made her way through the crowds. She was dressed in a black suit. She wore dark glasses, and she was wearing leather gloves. She appeared to know exactly where she needed to be, and she stood directly behind Pamela Morton. The train whistled.
That's good.
The woman in black stepped and stretched both arms, palms facing forward, as she leaned back to gain the necessary momentum to push Pamela Morton off the edge of the platform onto the rails and under the train. One man blocked her path, a second pulled her back from behind, while the businessman next to Pamela Morton threw his arm around her back. "What are you doing?" she shouted, struggling to break free. "Get off me!" The train braked, slowed, and stopped. The businessman let her go, and just as Pamela was about to complain to the station master, she saw that Annabel Morrison was being held by the 2 men behind her. "You," she said. The doors to the train opened, and the people of Cambridge boarded and alighted. Inspector Keating came forward to make his arrest. "You all right, Mrs. Morton?" "Just about." "I'm sorry if we frightened you. Sometimes desperate crimes require desperate measures." Pamela Morton looked hard at the inspector. She did not appear to believe him. "We had 2 men following Miss Morrison and 1 man guarding you since you entered the station. I'm surprised you hadn't noticed." "And how did you know someone would try to kill me?" "We didn't. It was Canon Chambers who suggested that an attempted murder might take place, and that we should be on our guard. But you can ask him yourself. He's been summoned." "It's very kind, Inspector. I should like a word with him. More than a word, I'm afraid." "Oh, easy on him, Mrs. Morton." "I most certainly won't," Pamela replied. And when Sydney finally approached, he could tell that he was not going to be given the welcome he had been expecting. "What on earth do you think you were doing, having me followed?" Pamela called, before he had even reached her. Sydney held out his hand in greeting, but it was not shaken. He let his arm fall and he apologized. "It was, I am afraid, a necessary evil." "Was this the only way of doing things? And how did you know it would happen here?" "You take this train every Wednesday, I think." "Most Wednesdays." "Miss Morrison has always been very particular about the train times. I also noticed that she liked to read Russian novels." "Fascinating. But I fail to see what this has to do with me," Pamela Morton replied icily. "The first time I spoke to her, I realized that she was reading Anna Karenina, a story of adultery that begins and ends on a railway platform. I informed Inspector Keating of my suspicions, and although he didn't quite believe me, he trusted me sufficiently to provide men for your protection." "And how did that woman know about me?" "That I cannot tell." "I could have been killed. Why didn't you tell me?" "Sometimes it is not always what you know that matters. It is also what you
We
withhold.
don't have to go across another...
If you had known of the possible danger, then your behavior might have become unpredictable. It was vital that you knew nothing. Dicey, if you ask me. A calculated risk, taken by someone you could trust." "That's all very well for you to say, but we have a good end, do we not? Your suspicions were proved correct." "So that frumpy nobody did everything?" "It appears so. Then I was right. You did not point the finger. No, but I certainly raised the alarm. Pamela Morton
Something red has
hesitated.
come up on the thing, but I can't read it.
There'll be a trial, then? Of course.
Something
I
red
see.
has come up, but I can't read it.
How public will the information become? What shall I tell my husband?
24.1.
How can I explain why his secretary tried to kill me? Sydney sighed.
Read it either.
You can tell him that Miss Morrison was in love with him and wanted you out of the way. Most men are flattered when they discover that they have a secret admirer. Convince him of that, it shall blind him to everything else. I hope you're right.
Suggesting it is now.
Interesting that you,
Well, it
of
can't
all
tell, 'cause
people,
it's
should
assuming
advocate
you're
the
going
telling of
40 miles an hour.
untruths.
No.
Saying half
Sydney
an hour.
offered her his arm and began to escort his unwitting accomplice
You're
from the
doing 10
station.
miles an hour.
In your case, isn't it simply a matter of preserving the status quo? I'm sure he'll believe you. Trust me. Pamela Morton gave him a steely look. You know, Canon Chambers, I think I've trusted you enough for one day. That evening, Sydney stopped outside Hildegard Staunton's front door. He was about to ring the bell when he heard the sound of the piano playing inside. The music was controlled and mathematical. It had a precise beauty that stated its theme, took its own time, recapitulated, and then moved to its inevitable conclusion.
I don't know.
It was the final movement of Bach's Prelude and Fugue in B minor. When it had
I see
finished,
that it was there.
and Sidney was certain that the music was not going to continue, he rang the doorbell. As he did so, he realized that he had not decided how much to tell Hildegard Staunton and how much to leave out. Inspector Keating had
not
informed him
wonderful,
that
the
he thought the
critter's
news
just
of
been
Annabelle
down that
Morrison's
way.
arrest would be better
So
coming
you're
from a
all right for
clergyman
the next 2
than
or
a
3
policeman.
miles, but the top of the
The
moor
light in
is
the porch came on.
Really bad.
The
really
door
bad.
opened.
It took us
And
hours to
Hildegard
get across.
Staunton smiled. Come in, she said.
Pretty deep, yeah.
I had forgotten how tall you are.
We've come from Exeter.
I'm often too tall
Yeah.
for a room, said Sydney. I tried
Must
to
be, yeah.
sit down
Stupid
as
sat
soon as
nav.
it was
I've
light
got
to
a
do so.
map with me, unfortunately.
We're trying to get to Mary Tavy. Mary Tavy.
Yeah, if it's like this, it's fine. Yeah.
It flows across and you can't see anything, but you just keep it straight.
We've been in worse places.
Thanks so much. Good luck. Absolutely white now.
I hope you don't develop a stoop, Hildegard replied. I always think a man should be proud to be tall. I try not to be proud, said Sydney, sounding more pompous than he had intended. You have come to tell me things? I have come to return your husband's diary, and yes, I have come with news. It is not easy. I'm not frightened of difficult things, Canon Chambers. It is to do with Miss Morrison. Ah, she loved my husband, I think. It seems she did. Unfortunately. Oh, Hildegard Staunton interrupted. Now I see. Yes. Sydney hesitated. He wondered how much she understood. He loved me, but he wanted another. And I am afraid that it was she who killed him. Ah, yes, of course. I see. We sometimes kill the thing we love. I am very sorry, Mrs. Staunton. Yes. I need to think now. Perhaps I need to be alone to do this. Then I will leave you. No, do not leave. Please stay.
We'll
Sit
have all
beside
of
me.
this on the sat nav, on the
Let me think.
Dashcam.
I will try not to cry.
Quite nice.
Sydney moved and sat beside her.
The only trouble is I'll have to
He took her hand
stop
and
it
held
at the
it.
end and
Hildegard tightened
have
the
it
grip
until
as she
we-
spoke. I do not know what I am saying, perhaps, so you must not believe me. But to know this, not even part of this is relief. That he was not so sad that he killed himself. That I did not drive him to do such a thing. She looked at Sydney, and the tears came. Is that so very selfish? Hildegard took her hand away, and Sydney felt in his pocket for a handkerchief, but he was too slow. I don't think anyone thought that. It does not matter what anyone else thought. I thought it. She stood up and moved away. Sydney felt the pain of her parting. I wish you hadn't. We cannot help what we think, Canon Chambers. But perhaps sometimes we should not dwell too much. No, said Hildegard, and her tone brightened as she tried to pull herself together. You are right. It is why I play the piano. It stops me thinking. She sat back down beside him. Do you play? I'm afraid not. I should teach you. Sydney smiled. His lessons at school had been a disaster. He never could get the hang of two different clefs. I think Germany is a rather long way to go for lessons. Yes. Hildegard smiled sadly. I suppose it is. Does she hang, this woman, for what she did? It seems most likely. I'm not in favour of another death. Neither am I, but it is the law of our land. You should change it. Racht tragt keine Frucht. It is not in my power. But one day, I hope, in my lifetime. They were still sitting beside each other, and neither of them wanted to move. Hildegard Staunton gave Sydney a playful pat on the knee. And what about you, Canon Chambers? What about your lifetime? It's very simple. I have my job. I have my calling. You do not have a wife, I think. No. How did you know? Hildegard smiled. I can't really imagine it, he began. You have not been in love? I'm not sure. Well, there is time, Hildegard said gently. Sydney decided to move the conversation briskly away.
It's getting longer.
It would not do to talk like this.
It's now 40 minutes.
But you, Mrs. Staunton, please, call me Hildegard. I will, if you don't mind. Of course I don't mind. I asked you to call me by my name, and you are Sydney. An unusual name. I was named after a Victorian clergyman. And who was he? Sidney Smith. He was quite a character. He once said that his idea of heaven was eating pâté de foie gras to the sound of trumpets. I'm not so sure about that. In any case, I think I prefer the Sydney of this world to any Sydney of the past. That's very kind. Now, what do you think I should do with my life, Canon Chambers? It's a strange feeling to have no responsibility for someone else anymore. You must not let this blight your life.
I'm having to keep the...
I know it will be
said,
hard.
I'm sorry.
And I know that you will not forget it. I hope, if I may say so, that you will perhaps be a little more selfish. There is only so much self-sacrifice we should give. Hildegard was amused. I never thought I would hear a priest telling me to be selfish. You think I have made a sacrifice of my life? No. All I hope is that you will find happiness again. Hildegard stood up and picked a porcelain figure off the mantelpiece. It was of the little girl feeding chickens. Take this, she said. Sydney was caught off guard. Oh, I don't think I could. Stephen bought it for me when he thought we were going to have a child. He always wanted a girl. But you must have it. Perhaps you will be luckier in your life than we have been. Your life is not over. Please, said Hildegard, take it to remember me by. Sydney could hardly bear the days that followed. He could not concentrate on his work,
it's night.
not least the Advent sermon that he was due to preach at King's. and the idea of another evening in the Eagle with Inspector George Keating had lost its appeal since their meetings had become a matter of work rather than pleasure. Hildegard had sent him a letter to remind him of the date of her leaving. Sidney had been so uncertain as to what he would say, and how he might ask for her forwarding address so that he could write to her properly, that he almost missed her departure completely. A removal van was parked outside the house, and Hildegard was waiting for a taxi to take her to the station. She was dressed in a dark blue coat, and held her gloves loosely over a matching handbag. "I'm glad I arrived in time," said Sidney. "I would have asked a taxi to stop at your church. It's not so very far away. I might not have been there, but you are here now." She smiled. "At last. And I'm glad. I hope you will come and see me in Germany." "Yes, Hildegard tried to stop his embarrassment. "I do not believe in farewells." "No. Well, it's only that it might be difficult to arrange." "Nonsense. I will help you. Because I do not think I will come here again."
300 meters, right.
Sidney could not understand why his words would not come. "I've never been to Berlin," he said. The taxi pulled up, and Hildegard paused, as if she was wondering whether to get in it after all. "I will write to you. I will send you my address." "Yes, of course," said Sidney. She held out her hand. "Thank you. You are a good man." "I don't know about that." As he took her hand, Hildegard leaned forward and kissed him lightly on the cheek.
I
"I will not forget you," she said. "Nor are you." Sidney watched the taxi recede into the distance. He bicycled back to the vicarage. Outside the front door was a large brown case. Hildegard had instructed the removal men to leave the case of Bushmills that she had been sent from County Antrim for Christmas. The card was attached. "For my friend Sidney, who I know will appreciate what lies within. With love and gratitude, your Hildegard. Your Hildegard." Sidney did not know what to do. He sat in silence in his study. Then he began to write his sermon. It would be about hope, he decided. It would be about grace and light in darkness. Sometimes he stopped to think about Hildegard. He imagined her on a train, then on a ferry, and then walking through wintry German streets until she reached her home. He wondered what she would say to people, and if she would speak about all that had happened, or if it would be like the war, which had rendered people silent about the past. There were some things about which it was too painful to speak. The next evening he made his way to King's College Chapel. The service made his sadness at Hildegard's parting all the more resonant. This was the end of the day, a chance to contemplate mortality and glimpse eternity. Singing is the sound of the soul, he thought to himself, as the precentor continued the responses. "O God, make speed to save us. O Lord, make haste to help us," the choir boys replied. He prayed for the soul of Stephen Staunton. "We will live as we have never lived." Those had been his last words to Pamela Morton, and yet, perhaps, they also spoke of a world beyond our own. Sidney looked up at the darkened, stained glass. He had learned more about love in the past few weeks than he had seen some of its extremes, jealous, tolerant, forgiving. He had seen it disappear. It was the most dangerous and sometimes sudden and unpredictable down, at other times loyal flame of a life. Together in prayer. How we love, he thought.
Alex Jennings, Timbers and the Shadow of Death by J. Callahan, and it was a big fit.
Cannon set to become a detective. Indeed, after a funeral, when an elegant voiced her suspicion that the recent was not suicide as murder. 53, and the last rays of Grantchester. Lamont Staunton, shielded their eyes to the lunchtime wake in the Red Lion. Leads and relatives from his childhood home in Inns.
Try it.
The day had been too good.
Then you have to
Sydney had changed.
Is that...
Blood.
Now easy, baby. Take it easy.
But now? And why did someone make up the...
But come on, Doctor.
Oh my.
A razor. Throat razor.
Beautifully ebony with a design in chasing shells of a man.
A bandage.
A blood. That's horrible.
Yes, has been at work tonight. A blind barber, a doctor, dramatized for radio. Donald Sinden as Dr. Fell. Extracts from notes made by me returning from an American lecture to a 4th 1938 Victoria. But the return journey, so I thought it best to cable, asking them to meet me in Southampton. That's done your own. Oh, come on, it's hardly my fault. That young lady, what was her name again? Not getting involved. Briefly, on the voyage off to New York. And we found we were just using. Oh, really? Yes, and she made another friend. A man called seems to have a talent for making friends. So is Curtis. To take up a post in the US, those diplomatic stuffed shirts. Daniel. I wonder how much so do I. He only got it good. But there was one thing that you heard of. Lord Sturtevant. Has no friends, so it's the one yet. He had been in bought off for auction. Curtis, the old boy. He told Curtis, and he managed to catch a glimpse of his lordship when he came. Gunther was sighed.
anybody in sight. Come up the gangplank. Anyways, a fabulous elephant. I'd say it was no stone bleeding. Don't tell me it's been stuck. I do know. And you know who's... I did. What? You're dead. After that, confused. I get it. Yes, okay. It began. I'd been taking a stroll on deck. A storm clouds gathering. I happened to meet Peggy.
Well, I was hoping I might find you. I'm trying to find Curtis.
What? Why is something wrong?
The lounge. He never turned up. Someone.
Excuse me, Doctor. Can I have Mr. Warren? I'd like to see his cabin, sir.
What?
Serious damage, madam, but I think it's on the floor with a towel around his head and a bit of something handsome.
Come in. I don't know. That's the trouble. Thing. I thought I got rid of it. I haven't got time for that. Listen, what do you
You
see?
open your window a little to see through air.
Did you find me? Didn't you?
And how?
So I need to melt
That's
me
what
up.
at a party for his friends. The senator was making speeches. When I got done with
You mean told what you read?
when they got on to world politics in Germany, France, and Italy, what they could do with their battleships.
Sorry,
It started
We're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
And then I
Say we've still got another 3 hours.
Look, he's still afloat. I said I'd send him the films and he could... Well, it wasn't at my best that the films mixed up. I sent him some cute... Only I didn't discover that till... I had to go to the radio and the operator read it out. He said it was easy. It said, check it, they look like bears. Where
I can't
is...
do this. Whatever I do, I don't want to go.
But when it hit me, I ran down and I found someone in here opening up the can. The curtain was drawn over the porthole. It was hung on my grim death. That's when I came to, he'd gone. But what he's got is still dynamite.
Oh, shit.
No, I've got to find the guy that's the film. I didn't even know about it myself.
The operator read it aloud.
Sure, there were other people who understood it.
Unless someone on board this ship to take a chance.
Well, if he does, I'll be ready for him.
That's right. It's lying unconscious. We can sit and pick.
Oh, great. No, say I fell over when the ship started to roll. Say that I must be left alone trying to sneak back. It happened next door. We can lie low with the living daylights out of him. Come!
I had grave times about it. But my companions were agreeing to Curtis and the empty cabin, his team. And right now, there were only 4 of us. And the captain was Kyle. At least Betty apologized on give them a real version of the events.
Knocked himself out, eh?
floor so highly polished. It's
I'm suggesting this line has an excellent safety record.
the SS Gigantic went down.
Lower your voice a little.
In a rough sea like this, accidents could easily happen.
Yes, we seem to...
Though they do say the skipper of the Gigantic would... I hope you're not a heavy drinker, Captain.
Sorry, enough?
It's just that you seem
Yeah,
a bit...
there's a big
Don't
bin.
expect you're anxious about Lord Sturton and his end. After all, if there were a duty, it's the man in charge. I suppose you...
No, we're not discussing my problem. Were you there when the accident happened?
But I saw him soon afterwards, long on the back of his head.
Trusty, what do you think, Mr. Card? Your special position? Of all I've made so against us, one of us are saying soon recover. No, I must leave you. Take hold.
Yes, of course, Captain.
Right. We should have teased you, it's a
I did try to warn
on a roll. It seems that...
Really?
New Whitwood had joined us. He just received a suspect responsible for the Stella killing. The FBI's, and they advised him to keep us
Because of Stetton's
keeping safe. You boys, was a mule.
That's the man.
Swayed him to change his mind.
Tell Captain... I mean...
Perhaps we should.
That might
I don't know anything about the McGee, but it was the British Embassy was involved. There was a well-known British Jew, the loyalty. He was staying in Washington to reset the letters for his wife. Some hours later, rocked up his head smashed in. So Curtis got off lightly. Wasn't a great pilot, you would think. We soon thought. Cabin.
This guy came across my film by hits.
But you haven't got any jewellery.
Wait till I get my hands on it.
another one.
Sounds like a girl. I know it's crazy, but... Come on. Kevin.
Who is she?
How do I know?
Ew.
Oh, it's pretty cool.
Near the nose, back of the head.
I said I hope
do?
there... No, I said I hope there are.
1, 2, 3, up.
Yeah.
I've made her as comfortable as I can, but she's much the ship's doctor.
Oh, I'm sure you don't know her.
Certainly. I've seen her before somewhere.
And that was your cabin door shut.
There he goes.
Come on! He's going out! Oh!
Was pitching
Much better.
tilted the passageway. It was like... We followed him outside. Gale force, winds, I tried to warn the others. Be careful! Winds, towering words, and embrace stinging spray. Plane of a man.
I'll get you this time!
The metal tin fell from the man. Peggy caught it. It was half open. Her face changed. The circular box changed. Curtis rejoined.
What the hell? That's not my...
But you got the thief.
Sure, his feet. Or he's out for the count. Under the lifeboat.
Hiding all over.
Let me... What a pity.
Not the thief.
I'm afraid not. Captain persuaded Lord Sturton to keep the emerald in the ship if he's coming round.
Oh, he'll think I was... He's never going to believe me.
Don't worry, leave this.
What happened? Broke my jaw.
Oh, Captain, now what? Stay where you are. Have you?
Oh, I have not been drinking.
Dartmoor must
fussing
end
over me.
eventually.
Try not to worry. I'm sure it will.
Where's my elephant?
I knew he'd been drinking.
Eventually, some of the crew arrived. But another shot returned to Curtis's cabin. And when we looked in the cabin, the girl had gone too.
Since we left her here.
Unless she was faking it all along. Suppose she was sent as a decoy to get into my cabin.
There was nothing.
Sheets and blankets aren't even resisted. Look at the pin on them.
Blood?
The captain had returned.
15 miles.
We told him as much as I admit it sounded rather improbable. Help him find the emerald. He
Well, I'm a fair-minded man.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate that.
But I'm warning you, you have 24 and the vanishing young lady.
Now all we got to do is find it.
Yes. Where did you hide
As soon as the captain started to come round, I
it? Someone's cabin.
Then we find the number of the cabin. Well, don't be silly, they don't have them. But it must have been either 405, unless it was 407.
And this is 408.
Well, then it's up. Tomorrow we'll check the passenger list to see who for the missing girl. She can't have gone far.
Thinking what I'm thinking? Someone went to so much trouble to change. There might have been more blood later.
Someone came back into the cabin and...
I want to take a look at the mattress. Dear God.
Is that...
Blood.
Easy, baby. Take it easy.
Where is she now?
I don't know.
Where?
Oh, you see that one?
Yes.
Oh,
What is it?
old-fashioned cutthroat razor.
The handle's ebony with the design. The head and shoulders of a man's fist. A barber.
A bandage.
Oh, that's horrible.
And barber has been at work. Go on, you can't stop there. What does that mean? I mean, nothing of any important passenger list. Then I went to bed. Traces of a terrible murder, and you did nothing. Good would that have done? We had no proving. With several gaping, take risk. The murderer might have gone in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean with his strong swimmer. And in that time, I intended hand him over to the authorities. Only it wasn't quite as simple as that.
You amaze me.
Well, besides, once the story got out, he would have spread through the ship like wildfire, starting a panic among the passengers, putting the barber on his guard. However, I did find this passenger list rather interesting.
Let's have a look.
Those suckers.
Which of the two cabins your young lady referred to? The ones where she might have posted the jewel box through the porthole?
Yeah, 405 and 406. As you see, 405 was occupied by two Sisters of Mercy on their way to Rome. And 406...
Mr. I.M. Brain surgery?
That's right, yes. Curtis said he would speak to Mr. Kyle, very tactfully, and suggested I might make myself known to the two good ladies.
No, it can't
The next morning, when I entered the dining saloon, I found Curtis having breakfast with Mr. Kyle.
Hi there. Come and join us.
Oh, thank you. Good morning, Hugh. And Mr. Kyle?
Perhaps you can enlighten me, Doctor. I can't quite make out what this young man is driving at. Something about a parcel.
Well, a sort of parcel. More of a box. A metallic type box.
Which he seems to think might have flown into my cabin during the night. He's too polite to say so, of course, but I think he suspects me of stealing it.
No, nothing of the sort. I just thought you might have overlooked it, that's all.
Overlooked a metal box crashing into my cabin. It's true I'm a sound sleeper, but I don't think I'd miss a thing like that.
So you sleep soundly. You weren't disturbed by any other noises during the night? Any nocturnal toings and froings?
Not a thing. I'm sorry I can't be more helpful, but as I've finished my breakfast...
Oh, before you go, I've been trying to remember where I've seen you before, and I think I've got it. Yesterday in the wireless room, weren't you there, waiting in line?
I sent a cable to my registrar at the hospital, but I don't see what that has got to do with you.
Nothing at all. I'd like to get these little things cleared up. You know how it is.
I'm glad I was able to set your mind at rest. Good day, Doctor.
Morning. That's what you call handling things tactfully, is it?
Oh, well, he's obviously our man, isn't he? He was there when the radio operator read out Uncle Waldo's cable. He's the one who stole my film. And now he's got the darn emerald as well.
He's one of Scotland's leading medical men. He's hardly likely to moonlight as a thief and a murderer.
Oh, no? Remember Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde?
I also remember Dr. Jekyll was a character in fiction. And Kyle has an alibi.
I think that was
I need to see the Sisters of Mercy. They're next door to Mr. Kyle, and they hardly stepped a wink.